All
Okay,
right,
perfect.
gentlemen, I want a nice clean debate here. Okay, no arguing semantics because
Okay,
that's
bud.
dumb. Anyway, all right, your topic for debate today is whether or not the American Revolution was important.
Alright, I'm here to argue that the American Revolution was not that important.
Okay. Yeah, no, it was definitely very important.
All right, let's start. Let's start with Europe. We all know the economy in Britain and France crippled afterwards because they dumped so much money into this mess. But that fixed itself out eventually.
Well, the amount of time is less the problem, and more or less the political ramifications that were. You could think about the several coalition wars that happened against France because of the debt it accrued because of the American Revolution, and that led to a lot of change in Europe. For example, a lot of the empires of old were conquered or under new management. I could think of Spain was under was basically a French puppet state because Napoleon put his own brother on there. Napoleon took over a lot of the Holy Roman Empire. He was crowned emperor and then decided to say screw you to the Pope. So I think a lot of stuff actually happened in Europe as a result of the American Revolution. But that's just me.
I'd argue that's more of an effect of the French Revolution, and it isn't a result
I
of
just talked
the.
about the French Revolution.
It is a result of the American Revolution, but there are a lot of other factors at play than just the American Revolution.
Why did the French crown get overthrown?
Let me go into this. Other than the fact that they didn't have that much of money, well, because of that, but
Why
also
did they not have a
because
lot of
the
money?
upper class was abusing the lower class, and the peasants just said, "Screw it, we've had enough of this. We're
They
gonna
have
throw."
been doing that for a very long time. Why did it suddenly become an issue after the American Revolution? Oh, maybe it's because they were in massive, crippling debt, and what's the word I'm looking for? The hedonism of the upper classes was all the more apparent. There's the whole Women's March on Versailles. The most direct, attack on the monarchy was due to the price of bread.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned the bread because during the time of the French Revolution, they were actually going under a famine. So your whole argument that the American Revolution played a factor into that is irrelevant. I'm going to go into my next point, which involves Britain. What was the big effect that happened in Britain? Basically
In
none.
Britain, in Britain, yeah, you could argue that there was a lot of nothing, but I mean, the effects of the American Revolution were a lot more long-standing. I mean, think about the next war that they had. I mean, the War of 1812. That was a conflict, and that really, was not a very, though it ended inconclusively between the U.S. and Britain, more of a headache.
Yes, yes, and I'd also argue that going off of your point, that it did have a big effect. Britain did learn a lesson from it, and they, to an extent, got somewhat of a game plan for whenever a colony gets too big to manage. However, they threw out that policy when they were dealing with India, when they wanted to become a free state.
With India, it was less of the interior pressure and more of the exterior pressure. It was the issue that arose from, them having to... They had to either violently push down a peaceful protest, which the entire world was watching them do.
Let's talk about the American Civil War. The American Revolution can be viewed as people standing up for their own freedoms. And after the American Revolution, you can obviously see that that not everyone was free. We had slaves, women didn't have rights, and that, to an extent, fully led to the American Civil War, but I'm not going to argue that here today, but...
Correct, but I would then argue that those ideas on whether or not women should have rights, point being that those weren't really the talking points of the day. We have to think about this like of their time. So basically, the big talking points of the day weren't on whether women should have rights or whether or not, and wasn't the question of slavery. Maybe more so on slavery. Abolitionism was starting to rise up. You still had people like Thomas Jefferson, who
John
while
Brown.
still owning slaves, definitely saw it as a more reprehensible thing. You could argue that
until you
because
read his
he still
papers in
he-
his later life, when you see that he was definitely
yes,
very much
and
for slavery.
yes, but that's besides my point. And
Yeah.
the general consensus was that those things weren't the issues of the time. A lot of history leading up to the American Revolution, a lot of the philosophical thought was what's man's place in the world, and a lot of that was questioning the absolute monarchical role in general, about placing all the power in a select group of individuals, or God forbid, one individual. And so the main focus wasn't to challenge all of these different roles people had in society, but rather the political power that every individual man, of course, at the time, who owned property, and was of a certain demographic, of course, they should be able to govern themselves and what should or should not, lord over them.
Yes, but as you mentioned, it's people standing up to people in control who don't fully represent everyone there. And with slavery, not everyone's being represented. So that led to the American Civil War. Which...
Yes, and you're right, slavery did lead.
The American Civil War with I wouldn't say the 13th, probably like the 14th or 15th Amendment, probably definitely helped, leading to women's suffrage, which led to everybody having everyone basically should have at this point, unfortunately, due to how society works, not really how what happened, but everybody on paper should have been completely equal.
Yes, and if you look at the history of such documents like the Declaration of Independence, originally it wanted to have a clause, like I said, these ideas of the transgressions of slavery were still there, but in order to get the real goal, which was self-government and democratic rule, they needed to make sacrifices. They were crappy sacrifices, albeit, but those are the sacrifices that they made for their actual goal, which was governance. In that regard, the American Revolution was successful in gaining their self-governance and rule through democracy.
All right, well, Jacob, it was great arguing with you.